From Acres USA, you are listening to the Acres USA podcast, a conversational podcast where we'll explore sustainable farming, regenerative practices, and the latest innovations in eco-agriculture with some of your favorite farmers and ranchers. I'm your host, Taylor Henry, the owner and CEO of Acres USA. Welcome to the Acres USA podcast. All right, welcome to the Acres USA podcast. We're joined by Dan Glenn of Deep Grass Grazers. Dan, thanks for joining us.
Taylor, thanks for having me, man. I'm gonna enjoy today.
Yeah, sounds like you had a busy day yesterday. You want to talk a little bit about what you guys are up to right now in the season and where you're at and
Sure.
located?
Yeah, we are located about an hour north of the Florida line in central South Georgia, Bahia, Bermuda country. We operate we're down to about a 300 head cow-calf operation. We'd gotten up as high as 600 head, which is a little overstock for us, but with prices being low, we kind of retained more females as the last few years went, and have been selling off, as these prices have gotten really high, back to really more of a sustainable number for us. But primarily, we are a commercial and registered seed stock business focused on kind of the regenerative sector, kind of that maternal type mama cow fit for the southeast environment. So that's kind of that's our focus. We spring calve, which for around here starts in late January and runs through March, maybe the very beginning of April, depending on the year. Some years we leave bulls in a little longer, depending on what opportunity to sell late breds is. Like for instance, here recently we've left bulls in a little longer because of those bred cows are worth so much more. So. But just got finished. Well, let me back up. We used to late wean around 9 or 10 months, and my family also row crops, so we have peanut harvest this time of year, and so we're really busy in October, and a lot of times we just leave those calves on the mamas and wouldn't get to them until November, and that was primarily a March calving period. What we found though is because our grasses are so poor, and that's kind of the hole in our grazing calendar is really in the fall. So September, October, November is really our weakest grasses, and so what we found is our calves were kind of sitting still because we were asking our moms to eat those stockpiled forages, and the calves were trying to eat it as well, but there just really wasn't energy or protein there, and the moms were slowly sliding off their milk production. So we started weaning those calves early, managing them separately, and we found that it gives the dam a little more time to recover, and then our calves do just as well or better off the dams. And when I say early, I mean 6 to 8 months, not 4 to 6 months. So it's probably standard for most people.
All right, so you were. That's a good overview of your operation. Let's go a little bit back with how you got to where you are right now. I know you grew up on the family farm. You left to go to college and got into some journalism, permaculture stuff. But what ended up pulling you back to the farm?
Well, only child, only grandchild. So it's funny. This picture right here, that's the my maternal side of the family. That's my grandfather's brothers and sisters and their family. My mom and my uncle are in this photo. But our family goes back about 3 generations in this county. My grandfather quit school in junior high to help the family kind of feed themselves, and was very successful, and built a farm from scratch, and was has been kind of diversified over the years, having had cattle since the 60s and various row crops, from commodity crops to vegetables, since the 50s. Started off as a sharecropper and worked his way up into, a real successful farmer. Owned a Ford tractor dealership for 30 years. So had his hands in a lot of different things. He passed away in '06, and in '09, I came home to help mom kind of steer the farm. His younger brother, my great uncle Tommy, who's also in the photo, uh, had worked with Grandpa since he was 18, and so Tommy was still there running the farm, and I came on and by kind of necessity stepped in to help with the cow program because no one, Grandpa, that was Grandpa's specialty, and no one was really looking after it. Not knowing that I was going to completely fall in love with raising cattle, but that's exactly what happened. And so, when I first moved back home, I wasn't really sure what my fit was, and after about a year of looking after the cows, I just hit the ground running and started my cattle education there. As you say, I was not prepared for this profession. My history was in English and journalism. I lived in Athens, Georgia for 10 years. I lived in the Caribbean at St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Helped a close friend found a school of sustainable agriculture there, and then moved from there back home with my wife, who I met in St. Croix, Jennifer, who she was teaching chemistry at the university there. And we came home, had my son Silas, and here we are 16 years later.
Yeah, how would you describe the cattle operation that you took over? A feedlot?
It was a cow-calf operation where we retained all our stockers through the winter. And so we were calving December, January, February. We were weaning those calves late into a feedlot operation where we were feeding them corn silage, corn, and soybean meal, um, and then selling truckload lots in the spring. And it was a successful program most times. Grandpa had built the genetics around cattle that would kind of pack on the weight. Had good frame. It was kind of a Sim-Angus. He kind of moved to kind of that Sim-Angus, um, I guess, hybrid, and it worked well for that. I got interested in, well, I guess the first thing is corn prices went up. I forget what year that was, if it was 12, 11, 12, somewhere around there, maybe. And we did the math on putting up the corn silage one year, and it was break even at best. And so that was the first year I didn't put up corn silage, and that was actually the last year that we ever filled the harvest store the year before. Um, and we started transitioning to the type of cow that would finish on grass as I got interested in grass finishing from the health aspects of the meat quality, but also just really thinking about trying to lower inputs for our cows in case inputs got expensive, as they have these days. So over the past 15 years, we've been trying to shift those genetics a little smaller, maintain as much fertility as possible. In fact, push fertility and try to breed a cow that was a little more efficient in the environment. And so that's kind of been our focus. We did breed, old line black Angus. We started by breeding old line black Angus bulls to Grandpa's herd and saving daughters and breeding old line back to those daughters. And so we have worked with Grandpa's genetic progress, but at the same time, we did bring in, a registered line of Y Angus and Pine Bank Angus cattle, and then started bringing in some registered reds. Um, and so we've been breeding those cattle as well. So we've maintained, you know, a purebred herd of reds and blacks since around 14, 15, and have maintained the commercial herd as well. So
Got it. What would you say you talk about your environment. So describe your environment because I think we're in wildly different places, obviously, when it comes to managing cattle. So what are you guys looking for in the genetics? What are you calling out? And then what are the challenges that you have in your environment?
yeah, it's a great question because each environment is so different, and for people to think that one cow is going to work great in every environment is not understanding, the importance that epigenetics plays and environmental impact on cows, especially when you ask the environment to do all the heavy lifting. We run cattle on really low energy, high rainfall grasses, which they eat. They eat those perennials 9 months out of the year, roughly. We do supplement our young cattle with annuals in the winter, especially, and sometimes in the summer. Um, But we have ponds that cows have access to. We do want to in the future improve our infrastructure so that we can limit access to ponds. But we do use those as still as water sources at some of our farms. They have limited controlled access to creeks at times. Um, you know, Even where we've supplied water, I've seen cows, stop at a puddle and drink water out of a puddle when they had another 200 feet to a water trough. So sometimes even, the best laid plans of trying to get clean, fresh water to cows circumvented by their own predilections. But hot and humid, long growing season, a lot of bugs, flies are really bad. Lice can be bad in the winter even. So a lot of environmental challenges. I've found that as we put fertility pressure on these cows, the environment has sorted off the heavy milkers. It's sorted off the 13, 14, 1,500 pound cows. And we find that, that 1,100 pound cow is probably about the ideal size for us, about a frame four. But we have cows that work that are 950, and we have cows that work that are 1,300. So there's certainly a range, and I don't think there's any, perfect cow or perfect size. We're just trying to do the slow improvement of making this herd a little more fertile and a little more efficient, in the environment year after year.
What was the process like getting the genetics to where you are now? In because you obviously took these animals that were bred for high performance, probably selling well at the feedlot or sales barn. I mean, what sort of issues did you run into those first couple of years sticking them on grass, or was it a slow, gradual shift?
Yeah. Well, it was both because I brought in some genetics that I thought would work in a grass environment, and they did. I bought a load of during a drought, and I forget what year it was. It was a drought in the Midwest. I bought a pot load from Woodstone Angus, Bill Woods of old line Angus genetics. I bought a pot load of early wean steers and heifers, and in the hopes of kind of creating a base herd of cows that would really work well here. Um, the steers finished just incredibly well, better probably than anything I've ever finished on grass. They finished at 1075 to 1225 probably, frame three, I'd say, frame three and a half. The heifers, we started with about 60 of them, and within 6 years, we had about eight left. And it goes to show that, those old line genetics, the further you reach back towards that original, Scotch Angus cow, the less likely they are to work in this hot, humid environment because they weren't bred to do that. And so, even though the genetics were there to finish, the genetics weren't there to thrive, in this hot, humid environment. So it was a good lesson for us. Um, but the original cows, that Grandpa had, we took well, actually, before I think we started putting our bulls on them, I remember keeping a few of the steers to finish on grass, and they just kept framing up. I mean, in fact, I have two steers that stand out in my memory that were finished at like 1525 and 1575. That was when they were actually finished. Full brisket fill, tail rump fat. But they were like frame seven, seven and a half. They were so tall. They could just look over. They put their chin over, any fence. If they wanted to jump it, they probably could. But that was a lesson for me, and it took like 26 months to get them there as well. So I thought, we really got to get the frame down on these cattle so we can finish them in a reasonable amount of time, and produce a product that I felt like our customers wanted. I mean, the sirloins of those animals were just absolutely ginormous. So that's kind of focused our efforts on also, keeping those heifers that weren't out of those biggest cows as well. So we started trying to watch our frame score a little more carefully. We're watching our rib shape and capacity, trying to keep, those voluminous, smaller to moderate frame cows off of those, that original herd.
So what are you? I guess describe your breed selection right now then throughout the herd.
It's definitely shifted. The one thing I've seen over the years, I was really interested in line breeding, and breeding lines of, the black and the red Angus cattle, and still am. Um, what I found was is the further down the road I went towards kind of concentrating genetics and lines that I felt um, could be valuable, could be important or useful to this environment, the more I realized that I was giving up weaning weight, and I knew it because I could compare against my commercial cows, my crossbred cows, and so I really had to reconcile a couple different goals. How important to me is it to create a bull offspring that has prepotency that is saving some heterosis for my customers, and also, how important is it to me to make a female that's going to go into my neighbors' herds, into people in the area, in the region's herds, and wean a big percentage of her body weight. And so, as my business became more and more focused on females, I really decided to open up a certain part of my genetic breeding plans to really trying to create a cow with a certain amount of heterosis that still saved a little heterosis for my customer, right? Um, and I also found that, hair coat quality was really important to environmental adaptability. And we knew that from the beginning, but what I recognized is, hey, maybe it's important, I mean, if you travel through Florida, half the cattle or more, three-quarters of the cattle probably have a good bit of ear on them. And we're not that different from Florida. And I didn't want to get the cows too big. I didn't want to negatively affect fertility. I didn't want to negatively affect docility. And so I didn't want to go the Bos Indicus Brahman route to try to maybe build in a little more heat tolerance. And the further I looked into, the potential options to start, experimenting with some crossbreeding, kind of led me to the door of the Centipole breed, which was created on St. Croix. And even at the time I was on St. Croix, I wasn't really interested in cows. I knew about the Centipole there, but I didn't really investigate, the herds that were there. But found Mark Sanders at Millertown through a friend who had been doing some crossbreeding, and visited him, toured the herd, and found some cows there that I really liked from a phenotypic perspective, and were able to buy bulls off of them. So that kind of started my kind of foray into crossbreeding. These British type cows that tend to work on grass, with a heat tolerant breed that I felt like wasn't going to give up a whole lot, but might create an F1 cross that myself and my customers could appreciate as a better, mama cow for the heat for this area. So that kind of started our crossbreeding program, and we've been doing more and more.
What didn't you like about Brahmas?
They have a tendency to be larger framed, first of all. So I had my cows about the right size. Like I said, if I could make all my cows a certain size, I would probably make them a frame four, and I'd make them about 1175 to 1225. I feel like that's a sweet spot between, hey, I can still finish this steer on grass without him getting too large, but also if I need to take calves to the stockyard, I'm not going to get discounted.
Yeah.
That's the one thing. The further you get down towards that 1050, 950, range on your cows, you have one outlet for your calves. Well, you have two. You can sell breeding stock to other grass finishers, or you can sell grass finished calves. But if you take, that three frame calf, what would be a three frame calf, to the stockyard, you're going to get, a 15 to 35 cent discount typically at the market. That's what we've seen in our area. So I didn't want to make these calves too small, but at the same time, I didn't want to have kind of a fire and ice mating where we were using these Bos indicus cattle, and we're making them too large. And I was also concerned about the ability of Bos indicus cattle to finish on grass, and again, the docility aspect, and the later maturing aspect. Those are all things that it kind of concerned me. So.
Hello, everybody. This year marks a milestone, the 50th annual Acres U.S.A. Eco-Ag Conference and Trade Show, happening December 1st through the 4th, 2025 in Madison, Wisconsin. For 5 decades, this event has been the nation's premier gathering for farmers, ranchers, researchers, and industry leaders who believe in building soil health, resilient farm systems, and thriving rural economies. Join us for 4 days of expert-led workshops, dynamic keynote sessions, and the largest Eco-Ag trade show in the country. All designed to give you the tools and connections you need to grow smarter and farm with a purpose. This year's lineup includes innovators like Gabe Brown, Joel Salatin, Rick Clark, Neil Kinsey, Dr. James White, Dr. Don Huber, Helen Attow, Dan Kittredge, Will Harris, Aaron Silva, Dr. Nasha Winters, and many, many more. Don't miss your chance to be part of this historic 50th anniversary celebration at EcoAg 2025. Register today at the link in the bio. Yeah. Well, I think, you described your frame as similar to what I would want here in Wisconsin. You could maybe go a little bit larger because we are dealing with cold, but that frame idea, I think, does play across regions. What are some of the things that, when you get into the grazing part of this, that you had to learn, or struggles that you went through coming from your background? Because we're talking about the breed and everything, but then you have this whole other side of the grazing management that also helps these guys perform and do well.
I think the number one mistake I made early was trying to ask the cattle to landscape, to take exactly half, 50, leave half, to accomplish, an eye goal I had out there on the landscape, and not watching the manure, not watching gut fill. Um, and I think it was putting too much pressure on those cows. It was asking those cows to do too much, basically. And so I think we have to balance our expectations of what we want to accomplish on our landscape with what our landscape will provide. And so, especially if you're moving daily, we've never really moved multiple times a day. We've moved as much as daily, depending on the time of year, on what we're grazing, on what we're trying to accomplish. Our average moves are probably 2 to 5 days, especially in Bahia Bermuda, time of year. If we're grazing annuals, we will try to move, 1 to 2 days. Or another technique we will use sometimes in the winter is we will time graze our annuals, where we'll give them, 3 hours in the morning and then pull them off, or 3 hours in the afternoon and pull them off. So that, because a lot of times those cows don't need as much protein as our annuals will provide, so we almost use it as kind of a supplement. But I think that's, probably the main mistake I made. So we're watching our cows. We err on the side of making sure our cows get adequate nutrition, on a daily basis. That doesn't mean we want our cows to be, BCS 6.5 or 7s year round. We don't do that. But we do expect them when they're dry to be able to perform, pretty well on not a lot. And obviously, when they're calving, pre-calving to 2 months post-calving, we really want to make sure that we keep some type of good forage in front of them. So that's the other thing too, is, a lot of times, you got to look at your forage program, your grazing, what I call your grazing calendar, and figure out, okay, what if my program is based on forages, that's going to inform when my ideal calving season is, and therefore my breeding season. So, we look at our premium forages at our farm are our winter annuals and our spring flush, and that really gets going mostly around January, February, and runs through about May. And so when I got home, Grandpa was calving December, January, February, and I slowly moved that up as I thought, hey, we need to rely on spring, as our primary. getting a little closer kind of to a natural cycle. And I moved up calving all the way to April. Well, now I'm moving it back towards January because I feel like we want those calves up a little larger so that also they can be grazing before, the fall slump, which is our worst time of year. Like I said, our Bahia Bermuda really is declining in energy and protein and production August, September, October, and November. And the earliest we can typically get on winter annuals is mid-November. That's if we're planning on time in September. So,
What how do you judge? Why do you say that's the earliest you can get on your annuals? Because that's
because our planning window for winter annuals is when the soil, well, I guess when the air and soil temperature gets below a certain level.
mm-hmm.
We found that if we try to put out, cereal rye, ryegrass, oats, any of that too early into September and it's 90 degrees for 3 weeks, it will do worse than if we waited, 3 more weeks and put it out after that heat. Like that late planted in the proper kind of temperature range will outperform the early planted because it will stun it basically. So we've
Yeah.
we've also learned that. Now we do have different species mixes based on when we can plant them. So the first thing we come in with are typically, and this is trial and error over the last 10 years. We start with, we lean really heavy on a spring oat, and we supplement it a little bit with spring pea, and with a hybrid brassica. And that's kind of and we'll put cereal rye in there sometimes as well. But that's our early season mix. So we might get started as early as the second week of September. It was really hot in September this year, and so we haven't had a chance, and we were trying to wean these calves, so it got in our way. But we're planning actually right now that early season mix, and from there we'll move, more into cereal rye, kind of a full season mix where we'll start adding, more cereal rye, more winter oats, some triticale, and then the further we get along, we'll start adding ryegrass, crimson clover, hairy vetch, and some other species as well, because those we know we really won't see good production until January, February, until they kind of get their feet up underneath them. And then, we try to be done planting our winter annuals by about mid-November. Otherwise, it's typically late February before we're grazing.
So where are you planting these winter annuals? Are they on your crop fields?
We do a mixture of both. So we have some dedicated tillage ground on our cropland, and we haven't. We're in the process of trying to minimize tillage on our cropland to get less and less. But because we do peanuts, we haven't made the transition to no-till there. We do minimum till with our corn, but so we have some dedicated tillage land on our cropland that we're planting on. We might harrow that and plant with a drill. This year, we're actually spreading fertilizer and seed together, and then coming in with a vertical till and incorporating that. Um, but we also have, we have a few under our pivot. We've got two under we've got one grazing pivot that's full-time cattle, and it's almost like a pie-shaped New Zealand style grazing pivot that you'd see at a grazing dairy. We have 8 different paddocks, all pie-shaped paddocks. We have 4 that are dedicated to perennial, hybrid Bermuda grass. We have 2 that are no-till annuals that we don't till and that we just overseed. And we have 2 that are dedicated to tillage. And so we have, dedicated areas. They're almost like our sacrifice pastures. And the reason we still till there is because tillage, especially in the fall, allows us to graze about 2 months before we otherwise could. Because our Bahia and our Bermuda just stick around, and just won't allow those annuals to really come on.
How do you manage the pivot? I'm assuming you're not, or how long are they in that cycle? Because are you trying to hit the area that they move out of like the next day with water, or are you waiting until they move out of that whole system and then you just run the water?
I mean, the ideal way is, well, I shouldn't say that. There's probably plenty of different ways, but you would probably allow those roots to just recover a little bit before you are going to watering it so that they have, and that depends on how hard you graze it too, right? If you don't graze it too hard, then yeah, you can come in and water um, pretty quick. Now in the wintertime, we don't seem to need the water quite as, we don't have the evaporation rates as bad. We tend to be typically a little wetter in the winter as well. So it makes more sense, to be a little more aggressive in the summertime with both our annuals and with our Bermuda grass to come in. And it's probably around here, you're talking, as much as 3/4 of an inch to an inch a week to really push production.
So how big is like the main paddock with the pivot?
Um, 8 different paddocks, but the whole pivot area is about 90 acres.
Okay. So then they're in there for 30 days.
Well, totally depends. That grazing pivot is also kind of where our base of operations are. So right off of it, we have lanes that go, to the pivot point from our working areas and kind of our staging areas. It was Grandpa's old feedlot is right there, and so we can go into the feedlot to water. A lot of times we'll trap them, by trapping them off water, so they have to come in to get water, and that's where we work cows, where we load out cows, where we weigh cows. And then, the lane exits out to the rest of the farm where we have a series of, that's about a 700-acre farm. And so we have a mixture of hay fields, grazing fields, and row crop land, attached to that farm. We have 3 different units basically, and that's the largest, all within about 10 miles of each other. So we keep we typically keep, the steers that we're backgrounding for sale. So that's another part of our program. We background all our steer calves, we'll wean them, background them. Um, if we have winter annuals, by that time we'll start them on winter annuals. A lot of time, and I didn't mention this earlier, but one of the successes we've had with weaning those calves early is to stockpile summer annuals, and so we will have grazed those summer annuals 1 to 2 times, and then we'll allow a stockpile, and then we'll use those stockpiled winter annuals for our calves to creep graze. So we'll typically just move a fence forward because we're not trying to get any regrowth at that time. So sorghum Sudan, pearl millet, crabgrass, sun hemp, cowpea are typically the main species that we'll use, and that's been just an ideal, solution for us because it's the one thing that has any kind of grass quality in the fall. But so we'll background those steers, and then we typically sell those steers between December and January. And U.S. Wellness has been buying those on a regular basis for about the past 5 or 6 years. So it's been a good partnership for us.
What's the economics on that pivot system being used for grazing versus cropping systems? I'm assuming Grandpa had it there for crops.
Sure.
I
It
mean, we're
it
at a
seems
time we're at a time where commodities are obviously at an all time low, and people have these pivots. Like I think of it
yeah
as a great opportunity to get a grazing system in. But what are the economics? Does it make sense?
yeah I haven't run the numbers in quite a few years. We knew we were going to be dedicated to not only grass finish production but also to breeding stock, and so I made the commitment. We did do the numbers early on, and it was especially pushing fertility, pushing fertilizer, a hybrid Bermuda slash ryegrass, operation penciled really good returns back in the, gosh, 2009, 10, 11, 12 years. I think we found it was closer to $500 an acre. But now that's all based on what you can buy a steer for and what you can sell a steer for. And so the one thing I've been trying to push, especially in this where we are in the cattle cycle right now, I've been really trying to preach the message for grass finishers to really consider open heifers, open 3-year-olds, using young cows for a grass finishing program as opposed to going and trying to buy a weanling steer for $2,000 and having him around for another 16 months, 18 months, depending on, how old he is to finish. The ability to buy a 900-pound open heifer and have her for 3 or 4 months, put a finish on her and sell her. I don't think there's many consumers that are going to push back against that product. And I also don't think that uh, the value savings, I feel like, is worth, considering that type of 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 program as opposed to buying these lightweight steers. Just don't think it makes nearly as much sense. I think they're too valuable in the marketplace.
Yeah, I agree. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
I also think, yeah, right now with cattle prices, these a lot of the guys that have these pivots in these big ag fields, they could probably get away with having a little bit more success planting it to summer annuals and running cattle over them.
I think the only thing that I would caution is that I would almost, unless they have experience with cows, it's a dangerous time to get in the cow business,
Yeah,
especially a stocker operation. So I think partnering with someone who wants to custom graze, might be a great opportunity. Someone who's been successful at it, someone who understands, how to ensure that product properly. I do think that there are opportunities. Well, when a pound of calf gain is worth $4, there's opportunity. That's when annual shine. When a pound of
yeah.
calf gain is worth $4, when a pound of cull cow gain is worth $1.50 or even more. There are certainly opportunities to turn forage into money. But
You're completely right about someone just jumping right in. I'm more
yeah,
picturing the commodity operation that has a summer pasture with a cow calf pair that they offset
yep,
or hedge their corn
yep,
prices by feeding their corn, in a lot in the
yeah,
winter, use a
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, with corn prices where they are, just even feeding cows, I feel like there's a lot of opportunity. You just have to have to manage risk, and then also, potentially consider some type of price protection for a market. If those are your stockers to begin with, or if you paid for them, just have some kind of risk protection because, with the prices as high as they are, there's just so much room for the market to fall. All the fundamentals say that these prices should be here for 2 years. I have no faith in the marketplace holding. I hope to goodness it does, but I certainly think that there's just a lot of risk in the marketplace these days. There's a lot of potential for volatility.
What's the potential? What could crash it? Like maybe
Uh,
if they
un,
started giving subsidies for
the
retaining heifers.
unknowns. I mean, what if the Packers start, shuttering, you know, floors for 6 months? What if screwworm, causes some type of beef panic with the consumers?
Yeah.
At what point, are consumers going to push back so that chicken and pork become more of the plate? Uh, I I don't. It's not the fundamentals that bother me. It's the unknowns that bother me. And I've only lived through. I was only operating under one cow cycle, but I remember the fall of 15, and the fundamentals did not create the crash we saw, in late summer, early fall. There
So
was something else going on.
it wasn't a true heifer retention that dropped those prices. It was
Not at the rate that they dropped. No,
yeah.
absolutely not.
So what do you think it
There's
was?
I've heard different stories. I don't know what to believe.
Well, let's get into the conspiracies. What's the conspiracy?
I did hear from a friend, and I didn't follow up, but it was based around some commodity hedger out of Mississippi who manipulated the market and made a ton of money. I have no clue if that was true or not. I just know that I fear black swans. I definitely want to uh, be, protected, and also just take advantage of high markets when they're here. I mean, that's one of the reasons, like I said, 3 years ago, we were, 100% overstocked. Today, we're right at probably the correct stocking rate. And that's just recognizing that, a bred cow here used to be worth 1,800 to 2,100, and today it's worth, 2,800 to 3,500. So, and that's below prices all over the Midwest. So,
Hey, eco farmers. This is Taylor Henry with Acres U.S.A. I hope you enjoy this podcast as much as I enjoy interviewing these folks. If you're serious about regenerative agriculture, I've got an incredible resource you need to check out, the Acres U.S.A. membership. You farm in the physical world, and you deserve a physical printed magazine to match. Since 1971, Acres U.S.A. magazine has been the leading voice in ecological agriculture, delivering the best insights from regenerative farmers, agronomists, and researchers to help you farm profitably without toxic chemicals. Our membership included physical and digital copies of the magazine each month of the year, which has always been a standard for Acres USA, but we wanted to over-deliver on content. When I acquired this business, I was happy to find that we had years of audio files from presentations at our annual EcoAg conference. And guess what? They were hiding. Well, not anymore. We developed this membership portal that gives you access to the recordings from farmers like Gabe Brown, Gary Zimmer, Joel Salatin, and Mark Shepard. We also include recordings of private events. Finally, if you are like me and you like listening to content, we are now producing a membership-only podcast of each issue of the magazine, so you can consume each article while you're out in the field. To make things even sweeter, you'll get discounts on books, workshops, and events to keep expanding your knowledge. So are you ready to take your farming to the next level? Join today for a ridiculously low price at eco-farming.com or see details in the notes. Yeah. I think if you were to put a conspiracy hat on, this would be the situation that could drive a lot of grass producers out of production, because I think a lot of people are taking the easy dollar, just sending them to the sales barn versus supplying their actual customers that maybe they had built up the last 3 or 4 years. And then when it flips and those customers have been told, no, I don't have product now, it could put a big dent into our grass. And the fact that it's actually probably cheaper in a lot of the country to feed corn over winter than hay.
absolutely. Yep, I agree with that.
But you looked at Australia last week or 2 weeks ago, where they announced that they were going to take imports and from us, but we're taking a bunch of of their exports of beef when our own herd isn't nearly big enough to supply our own consumer needs. So yeah, I'm there with you. It's just trying to navigate it, I guess.
Yeah, the export market is certainly one thing that could shift, the fundamentals pretty quickly. Now, what that's going to look like, I don't know, but it's certainly a question mark.
What would it look
Import market?
What would it look like if we actually did subsidize heifer retention? In a way, it should increase the prices for a year because there'd actually be less on the market. But then it would, in theory, would tank after that.
Right. Yeah, and what would that look like? A payment to a farmer for keeping a heifer?
That's what they're saying.
Yeah. I
Or
don't.
cost share to buy them.
Yeah, I
Probably.
think I don't like the idea of the government getting involved in this marketplace. I think
No, I think it's
it
funny because ranchers forever just like leave us alone, leave us
yeah,
alone,
right.
and then it's almost like it's like a commodity, because who's going to take advantage of that? Most likely, it's going to be commodity people that are hedging a little bit.
Yeah, also could, potentially put inferior heifers into the breeding stock market as well, who knows?
Well, yeah, that for
Heifers that
sure.
sh heifers that should be destined for the feedlot. I shouldn't say inferior, it's just, terminal heifers.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I don't know. It's just it's concerning when it gets mentioned. The screwworm thing to me also is kind of a big one. I could see that being used as similar to what happened with the chickens this spring.
Right.
Getting back a little bit to the management of the pasture, is a lot of your perennial pasture that you guys are working on right now, is that perennial pasture before it, or did you guys take some annual production crop land and transition it?
We've done a little of that where we've taken some land that we were, overseeding and well, we doing some tillage actually in annuals, and we put it in perennial pasture. Um, but mostly that that ground was already in perennial pasture. Um, it's mainly Bahia. Grandpa did establish some Bermuda grass, some coastal over the years, and we also have some ground that functions both as hay and as grazing. We also have some Tip 85, which is kind of your racehorse hybrid Bermuda grass. Um, the Bermudas allow, we don't use any herbicides. Well, we spray French rose, but we don't do any blanket herbicide spraying of our pastures. And we really, while we do believe in diversity in our pastures, we want to see diversity. Um, and we use mowing as kind of our herbicide. So over the past 3 years, what we do is, we'll go in and graze through pastures, and then if those pastures have a tremendous amount of broadleaf pressure left behind, we'll come in and we'll mow behind the graze. And what we found is, A, it kind of controls our broadleaves from taking over, but B, it seems to act almost as a fertilizer. It's like we're applying all this biological material to our topsoil. And from my perspective, those that diversity is mining from the subsoil as well, different nutrients as those plants require, different elements in order to function. And we're basically blanket applying those to our topsoil layer. So we really see a kind of a flush a lot of times after that mowing. Now we try to keep costs down by using a 1982 John Deere 4240, fully depreciated, worth as much today as when I bought it 7 years ago. Um, and a old double deck mower, 14-foot wide mower. So we do recognize that that's a cost, but at the same time, we feel like we don't want to get into a cycle. A, we don't want a monoculture in our pastures, but B, we also don't want to get in a cycle of, spray, kill. Or, what do we see next? We'd much prefer to, let the biology that's present in our pasture produce as much forage as possible, in kind of a balanced manner. We still use fertilizer on our hay fields and on our annual fields. We try to use chicken litter when we feel like we need P and K. Um, but we haven't sprayed any commercial fertilizer on our Bahia Bermuda pastures in, I don't know, 5, 6 years. So it affects our protein. We have lower protein levels, but they appear to be pretty adequate for our cow calf operation.
What's the scale of your operation? Animals and acres.
Yeah, right now we're probably around 300 mama cows, but now we keep, like I said, we background, you know, over 100 steers every year till December, January, and we develop 90% of the heifers. So we'll retain all our heifers besides just a bottom sort, and we'll expose them to calve too. So at any given time, we're going to have 100 to 150 heifers here that we're developing. We typically develop between 10 and 30 bulls a year, and we sell those, keep those for ourselves. All our bull power now comes internally unless we go outside to bring in another breed. The only breeds we brought in the past several years have been Beefmaster and Centipole. And I didn't mention, our other crossbreeding experiment, but Grass Fed Exchange was in Texas a few years back. At Fort Worth, we met Watt Casey of Casey Beefmaster and got to visit his farm, and have been out a couple times to visit his farm, and we were really impressed with his program. Watt and his father, who started the farm, they're one of the three original Beefmaster herds, um, along with the Lasters and the Isa. But the Caseys have had a one cycle breeding program since 1977. and they re-expose those that didn't get bred on time and sell them as breeding stock. But you can't go in and buy, a cow that was bred on time, and they've been doing that since '77. So we bought a couple bulls from there, and we've also bought a couple females. So we were curious to see if our cross-blooded half beef master, half Angus cows will outperform our half Centipole, half Angus. And so we've been doing the Centipole a little bit longer. So we're still trying to figure out what cross we like best, but we like both crosses. We really do. So still trying to figure it out.
What is your overhead on getting a calf to weaning?
Oh gosh, I should have that number. I'm not. I don't
Yeah.
want to. I don't want to tell you a lie.
In like
It's a.
the best of your ability ballpark. Because are you guys feeding much hay?
We do feed quite a bit of hay, and that it would come down to an opportunity cost as well because, so we harvest all our peanut hay behind our peanut crop, and then that's kind of our primary feed. So, you can value it as, I guess you would have to value it as what you could sell it for. Um, but that's probably, the one thing that would bring down costs in our operation is less hay feeding days. I will say that some people want to be zero hay. And I think that the amount of hay fed on a given year depends on how valuable a calf is and how much hay costs, and I guess how much hay costs to feed. And so I feel like there's probably a sweet spot in every environment of like how much hay you want to feed to be most profitable. And again, if you can get, if putting a pound on a calf is worth $4, or putting a pound of gain on a mama cow is worth $1.50, you can afford to feed a little more hay depending on its price. Also depends on year to year, if you're in a drought area and how expensive hay is. Hay can double, in a drought time period. But I'd say the two main drivers of our costs are winter, obviously winter feed and hay feeding, but also, we've increased our labor over the past 2 years as we've gotten a little more complicated. What one of the challenges we private treaty presently all our breeding stock, and we sell year round. And as we've gotten busier and more popular, the one thing I've come to figure out is it's labor intensive to get cows up from multiple herds, sort them, EID them, vet papers, and get them ready to ship and ship on a year-round basis. Um, and over the past 2 years, we've sold close to 300 head of cows. And it just requires a lot of labor to be able to do that at three locations. And our infrastructure is decent, but it's not ideal. Our cows follow because we move them. They're not too hard to round up. But sorting takes time, and we've certainly done a lot that and two, the opportunity cost of weaning on time, of getting forages planted on time when you're doing other things, that's been a challenge for us as well. It's one of the reasons why, with as much success as we've had over the last 2 years with just I guess, the interest in our program and the interest in this field, we've decided to have our first sale. So this April, we're actually going to have our first, it's probably going to be kind of a hybrid online sale where we'll offer pairs, open heifers, fall breds, and bulls of multiple ages.
That's what I
So,
was. That's
ho-
actually what I was going to ask. I
yeah,
was like, would it ever make
y-
sense to go
yeah,
into? Yeah,
yeah, and I've been hesitant just because of the amount of business we've done in the past, but over the past 2 years, our business is just times four probably. So I think we're finally ready. I think our clients are ready, and I think it will really free us up to do a lot of the infrastructure, kind of plan C that we've been wanting to do. We have some opportunities to expand infrastructure on some row crop farms that we don't have infrastructure on, which would literally double our footprint of potential annual production. And it would take all our, heifer development, all our steer backgrounding, and potentially our bull backgrounding off of, the areas where we run our cow calf operation. So it'd be a huge, and I've already bought some of the, fencing for that. We just haven't had time to do it because we've been so busy sorting cows, honestly, moving cows. So,
Yeah. I suppose it's difficult when you're scaling up in that business. You want to just you're probably a little bit nervous to have some sort of a sale because when you have a sale, I'm sure they're going to go, and if the auction doesn't go the way that you want it to go, it's kind of
yep,
disappointing.
that's right.
But I think it probably also creates a little bit more of a positive side for you.
The other thing too is, and we were, we were really interested in selling bulls, when we got into this, and then as we found that it was so much easier to sell females, and we really started shifting focus towards our females. And one of the reasons is, the type of bull we develop is kind of pigeonholed to just a couple different avenues. We recommend our bulls if you want to save females in our environment. So from East Texas to Missouri to Virginia, back to Florida. We feel like these bulls, they do well. The cattle, the breeding does well in fescue country. It does well in Bermuda Bahia country, but that's kind of our range. So if you want to save females or if you want to grass finish beef in our environment, um, those two things, our bulls do well for. Frame size isn't big enough. I mean, our biggest bull is probably a frame five, but our average bull is probably a frame four. So we really don't think that they're definitely not terminal, bulls. They can be terminal in a grass program. But so many of our clients or so many people who have cows would benefit from just having a terminal bull and selling those animals, at a stockyard. And a lot of people would benefit from having a terminal bull and buying the replacement females from someone like myself or someone else who specializes in, selecting cows that work in an environment. So our marketplace for bulls, I feel like is kind of limited, which is why we don't really want to sell. We want to continue to develop them for our own farm, and we want to place those in the farms that we feel like they will work for. But we're not trying to sell 100 bulls a year. That's not what we're after. We are trying to sell as many females into these herds in the southeast because we really feel like they are a good fit and can make people more money by not developing their own females, but from a program that specializes in it.
Do you see your operation moving into more of the cattle and moving away from the peanuts? Is that what you would do with that infrastructure on those annual fields?
Yeah, yeah. We have invested in a peanut buying point, so I'm a partial owner of a peanut buying point, um, and a grain handling facility. So we have, I mean, the only reason you can make it in today's commodity world where I am is if you own some other level of the supply chain. You have to you have to be a little vertically integrated in order to supply these lean times. Um, Having said that, yes, I mean, if I could do one thing, it would be in the cow world. Now, I don't want to be, I don't want to have all those eggs in one basket. So I would like other opportunities. Just in, who knows? Are we all eating, lab grown meat 15 years from now? I can't tell you we're not. I don't want this industry to go away. I love it. But I don't want my entire, income from my family to be around one thing. Um, Having said that, I would love to get away from tillage. I'm a firm believer in topsoil being the most important thing on our planet. And I understand the negative effects of tillage. So moving away from tillage would be something really important to me. But yeah, I don't enjoy the row crop part of our operation. And honestly, if I could live without a tractor, I would. But right now, I feel like they pay dividends for the ability provide our own hay and to be stocked a little heavier. Because I feel like it's with a cattle market where it pays for us to be able to feed a little hay.
Yeah. Are you the main person that's making a living on this operation? You still have brothers that are involved?
Only child, only grandchild.
Okay.
Yes, my mother and I own the farm. The farm is kind of the books are separated into the cow side and the row crop side. I'm kind of the sole decision maker. Um, my great uncle, 84, Tommy, still is kind of the field general of our row crop operation. So he directs day to day. I kind of make the spending decisions, the acreage decisions, um, those kinds of things. But most of my focus in my day to day is with the cow calf operation.
Do you have kids coming up?
Silas is 15. He helps me a lot of times on Sundays. He's a great help. I love working with him. I tell him he follows directions as good as my best helper. uh, I don't, he's probably like me. When I was his age, I wasn't too interested in the farm either. I had my head in a book. But he'll be given the opportunity to do whatever is important to him, really.
Yeah.
I think the most important thing, we can do for our children is to let them figure out their passions and give them the opportunity to chase them. That's how that's how you become great at anything is being passionate about it and having the opportunity to follow it. So we'll give him that opportunity.
Yeah. What's one thing that you're kind of testing out, or some new strategy that you're using the next year,
Hmm.
or tool? Is there any equipment or things that have come on the market that you're excited about?
Good question. Um, I don't think so. I'm interested in seeing how virtual fencing comes along. I have a friend, Ted Miller, who is um, he's piloting, what's the Australian fencing company? Um,
No offense.
Not No Fence, or they might be New Zealand. Drawing a blank on them. They're new to to this market. He's piloting one of their programs, and I was just blown away. They've got a beef side and a dairy side, and the dairy side transmits a lot more information. But he can look at his tablet and tell you which cows are likely cycling
Yeah.
when, which one potentially have some type of sickness based on their movement patterns. So I am fascinated by what these e-collars will be able to do in the future from a herd health perspective. I think it's beyond fencing. I think it's going to be a really strong managerial tool as they are able to bring down costs, is able to perfect the information delivery system. Um, so Oh, I almost had the name of it. I forget. But I do. I look forward to seeing how that comes along. I think there's still challenges, especially in the east where there's a lot of tree cover. I think you'll probably see this on wider acreage to begin with, out west and a lot of BLM land. But I do think there's a real future for virtual fencing. I think, 10 years from now, there will be a lot of practitioners.
Yeah, I think the data is going to be really important. It's going to be good. It's
Hmm.
going to be important for marketing too, because you're going to be able to show exactly, like this animal was never sitting in a feedlot.
Yep, it's true.
You want to talk a little bit where people can find you, what sort of things you guys have going on your farm, who you're working with?
Sure. Dan at deepgrassgrazers.com is my email. The website is www.deepgrassgrazers.com. Um, my contact info is there as well. I'm on Facebook only. See, we are, like I said, we've got our sale coming up in April, so just keep an eye out for that. Contact me if you want to get on the list to hear more about that. We take people, visiting the farm, you just schedule with me and we will, spend time with you on the farm. We love having people out. We love talking about forages. In the future, I might do some paid consulting. Right now, it's pretty much been free. So if you get me on the phone, I'll be happy to tell you
Well, you got
what
to
I
buy
think.
You got to buy cattle from them.
That's what we like. We like to twist people's arm
Yeah.
to be customers. That you'll get
Well,
me
you got
picking
to
up my
be
phone
you
even
got to be
more regularly.
you got to be careful of just saying
Yeah, that's
that.
right.
But
That's right.
the
But
expectation is if you can ask them questions, but you got to buy something from them.
yeah, or at least come to the sale and bid.
Yeah. Yeah. At least drive the price up in the crowd.
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. It's been great meeting you. I think, always interesting to talk to people in different regions that are doing, really cool stuff. And Dan also just wrote an article in the magazine, so make sure you guys go and check that out. And we appreciate your time.
Yeah, Taylor, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to the Acres USA podcast, a podcast production of Acres USA. Find us on Spotify, Apple, Google Play, and other popular podcast platforms. Acres USA is North America's oldest publisher on production-scale organic and regenerative farming. For more than 50 years, our mission has been to help farmers, ranchers, and market gardeners grow food profitably, regeneratively, and with nature in mind. Find our books and other Acres USA media and learn about Acres USA events at acresusa.com. Read our online magazine at members.acresusa.com, and we'd like to thank Acres USA staff for their contributions to producing this podcast. This episode was edited and engineered by Weston Larson of Acres USA. We're grateful to our guests for taking the time to talk with us about their experience.